The Society for Culture and Environment extends a warm welcome. You are watching a session on Indica, a deep natural history of the Indian subcontinent. Pranay Lal in conversation with Pradeep Krishan from the Bhopal Literature and Art Festival, January 2019. Mr. Pranay Lal is a biochemist by training and works for a non-profit organization on public health. He has been a caricaturist for newspapers, an animator for an advertising agency, and an environmental campaigner. Mr. Pradeep Krishan is an environmentalist and a filmmaker. He has been spending time and studying trees in Pachmari, Madhya Pradesh since 1995. He has created native plant gardens in Delhi, Rajasthan, and Garhwal.
To introduce Pranay, I'm going to tell a little story. I've known Pranay for about 4 or 5 years now. One day, soon after I got to know him, he came over. He said, "Pradeep, I've got a little present for you." And he brought 2 little round rocks about this size. And I said, "Ye kya laye ho bhaiya? What is this?" He said, "These are coprolites." I said, "What are coprolites?" He said, "Dinosaur dung." And I said, "You brought some dinosaur shit for me?" He said, "Yes, but this is not any ordinary thing. Dinosaur dung is really important because they have allowed scientists to discover that the origins of grass, which was thought to originate at a particular time at a particular time, is actually 20 million years older than we thought originally, because they've been able to look at the insides of dinosaur dung and find little traces of silica, which is one of the signatures of the edges of grass. So this is the kind of man he is. I mean, I think that should actually encapsulate the kind of person that Pranay is. I'm not going to say much more about it. But this leads us straight into the whole business of, I think the sexiest part of the whole paleontological world is dinosaurs. We don't seem to really know enough about dinosaurs in our own country. So Pranay, will you lead off with whatever you want to tell us about dinosaurs?
Thank you, Pradeep. Rather pathological introduction to my book and to myself. I've been told by the organizers we are 12 minutes short, so I'm going to dive straight into my presentation. I'm going to take you through a very, very quick journey into how dinosaurs came to exist, and a 101 on where you can find their remains in and around Bhopal or around the Narmada Valley. So let's begin.
Can you be a bit louder, please?
Bit louder?
There's a lot of noise from outside.
Oh boy. Is this good?
Yes, better.
Okay. Can we have these lights off, please? Okay. Thank you. So, about 290 million years ago, this is where India was. We were very close to where Antarctica is. Antarctica is still here. And India was covered under snow. Okay? And notice that Greenland was actually a tropical forest. So, we've never been the way we are, the same thing all the time. We've changed into being extreme deserts, to frozen deserts, to being tropical forests, being underwater. So, the landmass of India, the Indian subcontinent, has seen just about every kind of environment that can be seen. And we have signatures of that in our landforms and our landscapes. The kind of forest that lived at this time, that covered Greenland or China or Russia at this time, was something like this. There were cycads, there were short palms, and there was water that would fill in. There were shallow lakes, lagoons, and all these lovely trees that you see, they're not actually trees, they're palms. They're very, very tall plants called the lycopods. Actually, these tall plants that you see are called lycopods. They look like telephone poles, very straight and narrow, and they had a bushy thing on top, which were the leaves. And the creatures that lived at this time, the dominant creature was the ancestor of the frog. These are the creatures that lived. It's called the Lystrosaurus. This creature here, it's got this tusk-like thing here, and they were the size of a Volkswagen car. The small Volkswagen car, the Mini Cooper, it's that size frog, okay? The creature that dominated the water was this creature, the ancestor of the crocodiles, called the Chasmosaurus, okay? And our immediate ancestor was this creature, which is a mammal-like reptile. Now, we emerged from reptiles, and the first mammals were mammal-like reptiles, and they had claws, they had fangs, and they had a segmented tail. They would have scaly tails, very much like tails of monitor lizards and snakes. And they are eating a fellow reptile. Right? The divergence between this creature and this creature is very narrow. It's only just recently diverged. Now this is the time about 25 to 30 million before the first true dinosaurs arose. Something tremendous happened about 251 million years ago. I want these lights off. Can't these lights go? Light. Where are your lights? There was a massive amount of methane that was released in the atmosphere, and the earth began to warm. What happened was, ye safed lights and the seas began to get poisoned with something which was very maroon. It became inky and maroon, and dark blue in places where it was very deep. 95% of all marine life and about 85% of all land life perished because it was so hot and it was absolutely unbreathable. Only creatures that could live in burrows or could deep dive into shallow ponds that were still not affected by the effect of methane survived. The rest of them died. So among the survivors that survived was the shark, the crocodiles, the mammal-like reptiles, and a couple of other creatures. I'm going to tell you about those creatures that survived. One of the fossils that is found is of this very interesting creature that was a bipedal lizard that was found in Andhra Pradesh 235 million years ago. In fact, this village called Maleri, which is in Adilabad district. And a very, very beautiful sample of this fossil is there in the ISI Calcutta, Indian Statistical Institute in Calcutta. A very fascinating single piece of these two. It's in exactly this pose. You've got a fossil of a near intact lizard. And this was a direct ancestor of what would become the first dinosaur creature that evolved in India. Dinosaurs emerged in a parallel fashion across most land masses.
How large was this penny?
Now this was about the size of a small monitor lizard, about 1.5 feet. Okay, not too large, very, very small. It's a lizard, but it had this ability to get up on its feet. So what is unique about this creature is that we imagine reptiles to be walking on its belly or sprawling along its 4 legs, walking like, you must have seen monitor lizards and Komodo dragons, dragging themselves and wagging their tails and dragging their tails as they walk. But this creature would actually use its tail to its advantage to garner speed. Okay. Now, about 12 million years later, 208 million years ago, a creature like this emerged, which is the size of a chicken, called Alvolcaria. Now, it's named after somebody called Al Walker, and therefore it's called Alvolcaria. Okay? And this is one of the earliest dinosaurs to emerge. There's another creature in America called Troodon, and another dinosaur that emerged in South Central America called Eoraptor, which means the dawn raptor. Okay? So these are among the 3 earliest examples of dinosaurs emerging in 3 different focal places where the emergence of the earliest dinosaurs happened. And India happens to be right? And this is a story which I thought was so important that we needed to talk about it. And I wanted to share this with you in my book. But let's talk about when were the first dinosaurs discovered in India. Now, this was not too far from here. William Sleeman, Captain William Sleeman, is a very famous person in the British history, Indian history of the British in India. He was somebody who was very famous for eradicating Thuggy, right? And if anybody's seen that film with Pierce Brosnan and Shashi Kapoor, it's a very famous film in which he's being portrayed as actually a villain, but he's not such a bad guy after all. But it was Falconer who actually named the first dinosaur, and this was called Titanosaurus indicus. Lydecker renamed it Indicus because there was another species that was similar but discovered in Argentina. So he called this one Indicus, but it was a Titanosaurus. Now these backbones were first discovered by Schliemann, but he did not know what it belonged to. But he knew it was something very gigantic and a creature that did no longer live on Earth now, because there was nothing where he found it. And he found this in the Jabalpur cantonment, right? And there were several things being discovered in the cantonment of Jabalpur, including giant eggs. So there is a temple on top of the Jabalpur cantonment. It's called Chota Shimla Hill. On top of that, there is a Pat Baba Ka Mandir. And if you go there, you'll find cannonball-like dinosaur eggs, even today. And if you're lucky, if you go down along the two streams that emerge from there, they are dry river streams, chances are that you might find a broken dinosaur egg. And it's not difficult to find a dinosaur egg. So this is the creature that we're talking about, the Titanosaurus. It's a giant. It used to feed on these Araucaria trees, and there were other shorter pines that grew on the ground. And there were some grasses as well. If you see these light green strands that you see here, these are grasses. Now, a lot of paleontologists, after the discovery that Pradeep is talking about, have started putting grasses in between. Because before that, everybody thought grasses were originated in China and much later, and dinosaurs never encountered them. Now that fallacy has got corrected because of the discovery that was made by paleontologists in India, and for which Pradeep has a sample on his desk. Another very fascinating creature that was accidentally discovered in India was this creature, a flying dinosaur. Okay? Now, there were two paleontologists in 1953. They were looking for fossils and other economically important things other than fossils, trying to look for ores in Kota district. And they sat down in a jhopri for lunch. It was a very hot day. And they sat down in a farmer's house, and as they were having their lunch, they see a strange pattern on a piece of rock that is embedded on the wall. And they think that there is something there. They can't make out what it is. Initially, they thought it was a pattern of water or something like that left an impression on it. But later they found out that it was actually a skeleton of this creature, including a partial skeleton of a partial remain of the skull. Now that's a very rare thing to find a near intact skeleton, and with skull, you can actually describe the entire creature. You can also even come up with ideas on what it would be feeding on. Because if you look at the teeth, you look at the kind of bones it has, the kind of wingspan, you could actually say whether it was a top flight bird or was it only living, I mean, you could describe the entire ecology of that creature. Another very, very large creature from this time was found in southern India, actually south central India, just south of the Narmada, is this creature called Barapasaurus. And we found an entire family, the first discovery of this creature, again near Adilabad, was made by a very famous paleontologist called Sohanlal Jain. And they found an entire graveyard. Why this creature is so important is because for the first time, we got a sense that dinosaurs were very much like a herd of elephants. They were led by a matriarch, and they had adults on the sides, the juveniles in the center, and another matriarch or a senior person from the herd guarding the rear. So you had an entire arrangement in which the herd would move. And that's so fascinating because now that tells you that there is a maternal instinct to protect the juveniles. But it's also something that shows that these are very intelligent creatures. Right? Now this is the star. Everybody wants to know where is the predator? Who rules the top of the food chain? And this is the guy. And discovered actually quite recently what happened is that in 1982 they found a lump of rock in which they could see bones. So this is from near Baroda, a place called Rayoli. They found this lump of rock. And they said, okay, let's take it. The nearest place they could carry it was either Nagpur or Jaipur. So they took it to Jaipur. And there it was, just covered in a gunny sack and left. In 1994, it was, pulled out from the repository. It was gathering dust. And in 2003, two scientists from America, one from Michigan and one from Chicago, decided to take parts of it after having, pieced out the bones out from the entire matrix of the rock, took it to University of Michigan, and pieced it together, and they found an entire composite skull of this creature. And this creature, although slightly smaller than a T-Rex, it was possibly more powerful than a T-Rex. And what the scientists said is that this is like looking at, if you were to call T-Rex Muhammad Ali, this was Mike Tyson. And an extremely powerful bite, short but very muscular. And it's called Rajasaurus narmadaensis, because it was found along the Narmada in Baroda district, very close to where the banks of the Narmada are. Right? So, this is a typical scene of what would have been in the Cretaceous, the late Jurassic and the Cretaceous. You've got the major actors here. There's Rajasaurus, and you've got two other competitors called Indosaurus, and then Indosuchus here, and a Tyrannosaurus which has died, possibly been attacked by either the T-Rex or by the Indosaurus. But be that as it may, as you see in contemporary terms, you see a lion having, or a tiger having killed a herbivore, you have hyenas or wild dogs coming, right? So you have two or three other, parasitic creatures coming to take a food meal. And this is a typical scene. This is drawn by a friend of mine who, we don't have a painting like this. It was drawn for me gratis by a Russian artist. So, so I think I'm very grateful to him. So this is a typical scene, and notice that, you've got, again, the dominating trees here are palms, and you've got some conifers. And ferns, of course. Ferns are very popular. We find dinosaur eggs from Amarkantak down to Jabalpur till Baroda in such a large number that for a very long time there was no understanding that they were dinosaur eggs in a sense. In fact, cement companies in Baroda area, between Dhar and Baroda, were using this to make cement. So a lot of our walls, our chuna on the wall might be actually cement from dinosaur eggs. But it was only very, very recently in 1988 that the first paper recognized that there are dinosaur eggs in India. And we found massive nesting sites, especially in Dhar, Jhabua, and a place called Rayoli in Baroda, in Anand. But what's happening is, as soon as the news of discovery happens, you have people pilfering them. So you have people extracting these dinosaur nest sites, and this is again from Baroda. So you find Polish and German scientists, including Indian scientists, and even not just scientists, anybody. As soon as you know that this is a dinosaur egg, for curiosity's sake, you just take one, do nothing. But you have some very unique places where they are worshipped. Now these concentric circles are actually dinosaur eggs. And this is a Mahashivling because the tribal temple from where this is taken, it's in Dhar district. They think this is a Mahashivling. So they use it for worshiping. Right? So thank God for gods, like Padbaba Mandir and mandirs like these, they are the ones who are protecting our Dharohar in some way. Right? Here's the compliment. Okay? Now you may ask me, how do we know this is dinosaur dung, dinosaur shit, right? We find these in layers where of a certain age. So we know that this is between 68 million or 70 million years. That sedimentary record is very clearly known to geologists, paleontologists, and other people. How do we know this is dinosaur dung? We look at the composition of what's here. We look at the gut. If you look at these long strands here, these are grass. And if you were to further look into the matrix inside, you would find those silica shaped structures that are found on the blades of grass called phytoliths. Now, scientists at the Birbal Sahni Institute of Paleosciences have discovered several species of grasses now. In fact, there's a new paper that's coming out that at least 14 species of grasses existed that have been discovered between 120 million years and 68 million years. Another fascinating discovery, just along with Rajasaurus, another lump of rock was picked up, and this was a very large lump of rock. And they discovered that there was something that was coiling, and there were some eggs, some of these were broken eggs, and some of them were entire eggs. Again, it went to Michigan, to the same two scientists that I spoke to you about, the scientists from Chicago and Michigan. They found that this was a giant snake feasting on newly hatchlings of Titanosaurus. And think about the drama. Look at this entire drama that got captured in a fossil. And think of the travesty that for 30 odd years it remains undiagnosed. Thankfully, it did not get converted to cement. But even then, this is a story that all of us should have known, right? We should be conserving those places where cement factories are operating today, right? We've forgotten. Now, this drama and this reconstructions happened again in America. It's not our reconstruction. They told us the story. Thankfully, this has come back to us because it was a fair exchange. They got the paper, they got the research, we got the material back, and we are co-authors in that paper. Another fascinating discovery, we find a lot of footprints of dinosaurs. Remember the first picture of the earliest dinosaur that I showed you, that chicken-sized Alvelcaria? Now this trident-shaped thing that you see here, it exists on an entire slab. It goes for about 20 meters and it goes, like a chicken mark. And look at this. This is a 1 rupee coin and slightly bigger than a 1 rupee coin. So again, we imagine this dinosaur would be no bigger than a chicken. Okay? And what we find here is that this is a marine rock. The sandstone that you see here is a marine rock. What paleontologists imagine this to be is that this creature was an early morning riser, would have gone for looking for anything that the sea would have washed at night, say a stranded fish or a jellyfish or a starfish or something like that, that's got stranded behind, and it would feast on it. Okay? So it's something like this. Now again, this has been drawn by a friend of mine from Sweden because there was nobody to draw it. Right? So thanks to him, but unfortunately I could not get this on time and I have not used it in the book, but I'm showing it to you. Let's come to 200 million years ago. This is where India is. We've got liberated from the ice. There's been a lot of small volcanic activity that has liberated much of the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere from the ice. And the entire Earth is now a tropical forest. And then something happens. About 88 million years, 120 million years later, continents begin to pair off. And a massive volcanic activity happens here. Now this is important. I've just jumped 120 million years. So don't ask me that, what happened in the interim. There's a fascinating story there as well. But you need to give me more time, right? So this volcanic activity is called the Morondava St. Mary's event. Now St. Mary's is a small island of Mangalore. If you ever go to Mangalore, please do visit a place called the St. Mary's Island. It's fascinating. It's got these tall basalt which rises out of the sea, and they look like columns. Beautiful pentagonal or octagonal columns. They are beautifully shaped, and they're just amazing islands. And there are 3 small islands off the coast of Mangalore called St. Mary's, Coconut, and Banda Bahadur. Now, what happens here is that India breaks off finally from Madagascar. This is a critical event because what happens is that it leads to the time when the birds begin to emerge. Now, how did the birds emerge? Of course. Now, what is happening here is that you've noticed that, of course, we began with a feature like this, but in this period, as the oxygen levels increased, so oxygen increases when there is a lot of plant activity and microbial activity, but it also causes freezing. So when you have a lot of oxygen, the poles freeze. You remember India was under ice? That was the time when all the evolution and the diversity in the dinosaurs were happening. Why were there so many diverse types of dinosaurs? That's a natural question to ask, right? Now this is the time when the Earth had two frozen poles and the dinosaurs began to diversify, right? But then the continents began to come together and became completely green and devoid of the ice masses on the poles. The diversity began to shrink, and several of these creatures began to also shrink in size. Okay. I'm going to tell you another story, which is very fascinating and it's very unique to India. Okay, and it's very unique to Bhopal as well. Okay. Now, if you go to the Bhadbada Lake, have you been to Bhadbada Dam, the check dam? Everybody has been to Bhadbada? Okay. You know what's unique about Bhadbada? If you go there the next time, just look out for a grey rock which runs into layers. Okay? And it is on top of a reddish soil, which is a laterite. On top of it is this black porous rock. And that's the Deccan lava. Okay? Now everybody imagines that the Deccan lava flow happened only between Bombay and Pune and places like those. Well, that's not true, because a lot of Deccan lava did spill from till here, and even beyond. It went as far as Lalitpur. It's there in parts of Pakistan, and it went right across even into the Bay of Bengal via Rajahmundry along the river Godavari. It found channels and it leaked through them. Okay, it was the biggest volcanic event to ever happen in India or the Indian subcontinent. But what was so profound about it was that it happened in 3 pulses. Now, the first one happened 68 million years ago. The second episode happened very quickly in geological terms, a million years later. But again, massive. It was the biggest episode. And what it did was, it created a lava flow that went into the Indian Ocean and created all the Indian Ocean islands except Seychelles. So all Indian Ocean islands, Mauritius and Reunion and all the other islands, have been created by this lava flow except for Seychelles. Okay? Now, this is the size of Spain and France combined. Okay? That's how big it was. And under the sea. But in India, there's an equal amount of size, which is the size of Italy and Portugal combined. So that's how big it is in India. Okay? Now, what happens is this is building layer upon layer. It's not just one single pulse. There are several pulses happening, and what they're doing is they're releasing a lot of volcanic gas. Notice that the position of India is very close to the equator. This is the equator. This is where India is. And what it does is, if you have such a big lava flow and so much volcanic gas that is coming out, it girdles around the entire Earth, and it starts to suffocate the large trees first. And if the large trees begin to die, the giant herbivores are the first casualty. And if the giant herbivores die first, that means the top predators begin to die, because they won't be feeding on smaller predators, the smaller herbivores, right? And as a result, everything begins to shrink. The earth becomes hot, and this is how it would have looked: a smoldering place, layer upon layer. There would be cracks in the earth from where the lava would ooze up and again spread. Ooze up and spread again. Ooze up and spread again. Okay? So this is how it would look. This is a fascinating drawing by my dear friend Douglas Henderson. And this is how the ooze would have happened. There would be fire fountains. Okay? It's not Krakatoa kind of explosion. There would have been a few Krakatoa kind of explosions, but most of it was slow release of the ooze through cracks, deep cracks on the earth. There were some like this, which created some small turrets like these. But most of the lava flows we saw was in layers, like I was telling you. There were layers like this, layered ones. This is near Mahabaleshwar. But the volcanic cone that I was telling you, the explosive one, now this is in Manavar. Does anybody know where Manavar is? Near Dhar, that's right. Between Indore and Dhar, when you go towards Dhar, there's this beautiful, beautiful volcanic chamber that is actually frozen. What has happened is this has got frozen in time. The volcanic thrust was happening from here. The lava was supposed to ooze out. Something happened. The supply got cut off. and it stopped, it froze. So you got these lovely columns. Okay? Now this volcanic marvel is actually being destroyed to make Pradhan Mantri Gramin whatever road, right? And this is going to be used to make the road. And of course this is being cleared, but we fought for it and we saved it. There were 8 of these, only one half is left now. So you've got only half left of the 8. In America, you would be charging dollars to see it. In India, we are crushing it to make roads, or clear the, to make it a 4-lane. Well, we had to create that awareness and got the collector to say it. So yeah, that's what happened. Now this is another thing. So if you notice, there's a state highway here. And look at the lovely columns. Again, close to Dhar, but near the Bagh Caves. So beautiful. This is a man to size. I'm a terrible photographer, you must forgive me, but this is a man to size. And look at the columns here. How gorgeous, right? This is something which we see every time we go to Goa, right? Or Bombay. If anybody is from Bombay, Carter Road, for example, has a lovely lava flow. Yeah. Or this is a lava flow in Banolan Beach in Goa. Yeah? So the ooze, the flow of the lava would go into the sea and create these, kind of ooze flows into the Arabian Sea. Now I'm going to take you very quickly into how does India imagine dinosaurs? Right? I mean, we have no understanding of dinosaurs, and I don't think we've paid enough attention. What we heard was from Mr. Spielberg, or if before him, The Lost World, or those kind of literature, right? Now these are Lotpot, and this is I can't read Bangla, but if there's anybody from
Shuktara.
Yeah, the famous comic, and goodish attempt, but absolutely incorrect. You can't be walking with your tail upright and with no balance, and it's absolutely not possible. And this creature, if it is walking in a marsh, it won't be able to get out. So it's scientifically not correct. Then Motu Chotu ran out of competition in terms of villainy. They created a dinosaur-like creature which could breathe fire. That's the parody of it. Right? Again, several superheroes and nightmare kind of creatures, but dinosaurian in look. Of course, Bollywood won't stay back in such things. You have a very famous film called Samson. It actually did well back then, and it's available on YouTube. Please see it, purely for the fun of it. And here's a creature which looks like a dinosaur, and they actually call it dinosaur in the film. So this is a historical drama, but now we know that even in historical times, our Purvajas knew about dinosaurs. Here's evidence, and here is a snapshot of the film. Yeah, you can watch the film. It's on the Shemaru channel on YouTube for those interested. Very fascinating film. Tabassum, for those of you who know Tabassum, I don't know, the youngsters would not know Tabassum, but Tabassum was this very sweet actress from the yesteryears. And there was a spoof on, the Japanese creature, Godzilla. Which, yes, oh right, you're here. Okay, Godzilla. So we could not rip it off. We could not rip it off. So we said we'll do one with the rubber dinghy kind of a thing. Right? And he's walking again. If anybody remembers, anybody from Bombay, this is Charni Road, right? Anybody from Bombay would recognize this as Charni Road, right? Okay. Our stupidity continues. How we look at dinosaurs. Now in this film, this is Jole Jongole, which is Mithun Chakraborty and Jackie Shroff, has a creature which they call is a dinosaur in this film, and it's about rescuing a lost party in a jungle, all that, right? Now, what they talk about is that there's a ferocious creature, and they of course call it a dinosaur, and it has these very, very stupendous powers. It's got teeth of this kind, and it's got spines, and it's got spines everywhere. It's got very, extraordinary, nails and claws. Now, something like this cannot live in an evergreen forest. If you have a creature like this in an evergreen forest, it would get entangled. To feed a mouth like this, you would need a prey which has to be many times larger, right? Now, this is completely unscientific. And I'm happy that this film bombed, purely for scientific reasons. So this, if anybody goes to Calcutta and from the airport, if you're going via Salt Lake, you will see this languishing in one of the Maidans. It's just lying there. nobody wants to touch it. I think even the producer wants to, forget about how badly the film is done. He doesn't want to go. So thank you so much. I think that's all I have to talk about.
We can take questions. How much time do we have?
We have got enough time.
Okay. One of the things I just want to draw your attention to is the parallels between some of the things that Erwin Neumeier was talking about today in terms of how we are losing the earliest forms of communication of early man in India, because of completely inappropriate ways in which the relics are either not recognized or they're just being ignored. Same thing is happening paleontologically with some of the remains that we have. The same thing is happening with nature, with forests. So there's a sad undercurrent that links all these things together. And I think it's something that, if some of you at least have been awakened to understand these things, then that's something that's some good will come of that. But let's take questions from the audience. So please raise your hands and we'll give you a mic. Can you give a mic here, please? Let them go down.
Thank you, Pranay, for a very fascinating journey of dinosaurs. I just want to know, there is theory what we call as polycentric theory of evolution. Do you think that the evolution of mankind was happening at different places in the world, or it was just one center in Europe or maybe in Africa? Was India a center of evolution of human beings?
So, that's a good question. This was a theory that was. Is this audible? Is this good? So, is it better? This was a theory that was mooted in the 70s and it lasted till about 1980s. But the evidence now that is coming out, and I think it's very conclusive, that man left, our ancestor, Homo sapiens, left Africa around 72,000 years ago, came into India at about 60,000 years, or just before, just earlier than 60,000 years ago, and then traveled through the continent and went to Australia and other parts of the world. So I think that multi-centric evolution of the earliest ancestor of man is not correct. But let's also correct ourselves by saying that evolution has not stopped. Right? We continue to evolve, right? And even as society and as within society, we develop new traits, right? So those are evolutionary traits as well. They are signs of evolution. So people who left Africa came into India. There are people, for example, in Andamans who have got isolated after having reached the Andaman Islands and have not. There was no need for them to evolve any further, right? So they evolved maybe a few traits other than that what they inherited from their cousins or their very, very distant cousins in Africa. But in terms of physiognomy, they are very similar, but they might be still separated, right? Again, Aboriginal Australians look similar but are genetically distinct. There is a separation. So there is evolution happening, but we now know that the ancestor of the earliest humans was from Amazon.
I am Srinivas Murthy. The Gugua is there, Gugua Fossil National Park, and then we do have eucalyptus fossils there. And then in all probability the teak and sal and other forests, that floral composition that we would must have happened after the mainland colliding with the Himalayas and monsoons getting stabilized. Is it correct? Would you like to throw something on it?
Yeah, so first let's talk about the fossils. So in my book I show that things that have got reintroduced into India, like custard apple, the fossils have been found till very recently, till 38 to 32 million years ago. So now we know that custard apple, what we call sitaphal, was introduced into India by the Portuguese. But it's very simple to find a custard apple fossil, right? Same thing with Araucaria. We know Araucaria now lives only in South America. We find Araucaria fossils in Akal, in Jaisalmer, and so many other parts. And even Gagua, you found a fruit. It's in fact a very, very well preserved fruit of Araucaria. So
I'm not sure about the eucalyptus leaf thing. Right, I'm not followed it up, yeah, but maybe you're right. So I won't be surprised that if it has been found. So the local extinctions of species, and they end up surviving in Australia, it's something which is fascinating, and thank you for bringing to my notice. I might add it in my end notes of my book without.
You have to do some research.
Yes.
But it has been preserved there,
Yeah.
dated around 95 million years.
Okay, very interesting. And I will talk to people in Birbal Sahni Institute because they will be in the know of this. Thank you so much.
So Pranay, here is a question. I am Abhilash Khandekar. I want to know that you have done so much of research and there appears a need to preserve so many things. Who do you think in the country, the government of India, the state governments, the local authorities will actually be able to preserve it? Do they have the knowledge? Do we need capacity building? Or what kind of future do you see for all these things? Because we need to conserve and preserve them after all.
So it's a great question. I don't know where to begin, but let me just disappoint you by saying that the word fossil does not appear in any legislation. So if I were to say I want to preserve this fossil, there is no mention of it, right? And if I were to say that this belongs to me, or does it belong to the state, or does it belong to an institution, the government has no position on it. So if tomorrow a person finds an intact fossil of which is of incredible value to global science, the government will not have a position on it. It might be high and it might act high and mighty and say, we are going to do this, and kind of come and seize it, like it did in the early 60s for meteorites. I don't know whether you're aware of that case when meteorites were seized from scientists, but that was quite unethical. Now, like I'm saying that there is no legislation or notification or anything that provides legal basis for protection of these sites or the products that you get from here. So there's basically nothing just now. I mean, the government is actually. Well, GSI is not governed. ASI does not have in its schedule any of these, and doesn't fall under Antiquities Act. It doesn't fall under Monuments Act. It doesn't fall into anything. So that's the tragedy of anything that is paleo and geographic in nature. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I want to add one thing to what Abhilash asked. One of the saddest things that I learned recently was that the GSI does not even have a museum for the type specimens or geological specimens that we have in this country. It's to me, completely shocking to learn that there is no repository for type specimens of rocks found in this country, nowhere in this country. So when it comes to geology and it comes to fossils, which are in a sense part of geology, we're really on very loose ground.
Let me just add to that. I mean, he raises a very interesting point. I write it in my book in some place that if you really want to find fossils, you don't have to go to a fossil site. Just go to a geology department, and just kick around. You will find fossils because, when professors retire, they don't know what to do with their material, and they have to throw it out. The next professor who comes in, or any research scientist who comes in, he would be working on something completely different, and he or she doesn't care. And that's what happens to all our fossils. We have tremendous number of dinosaur bones, but we've got only 2 assembled dinosaurs in the entire country. And one of them is completely inaccessible to you. It's in ISI Calcutta, right? The other one is in the Birla Science Museum in Hyderabad, and you can't take a photograph there. While you go to any museum in any civilized country, they would actually encourage you to take photographs, right?
Has your book triggered any kind of ripples in the scientific community?
I'm seeing some ripples, but I was hoping that if these are ripples, then I wanted a tidal wave. So yeah, it's not there.
Let me say 2 quickly. One is that I don't think that it's simply a question of one of the reasons why I think Pranay's book is so important is that for the first time he makes some of these issues accessible to ordinary readers. And I think really it is the tidal wave of opinion and concern that rises from ordinary people that's actually going to make these things work and for us to be able to value them as a society and as a civilization. The other thing that I also wanted to add was that when you said ripples in the scientific community, one of the stories that I heard from Pranay was that when the book came out, somebody in the GSI said, we want to make a committee to try and poke holes in what he said. You know, and that's a very, very sad comment on the scientific, establishment in this country.
You had a question.
I was talking about this studio house. We are doing something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether you've seen the GSI monuments, but most of them are dumb, and I don't know. Most of them are concentrated in Rajasthan. And
There is some funding, I think, there. They are doing
yeah, there is a UNESCO funding, but it is, if there is no intent and there is no value to it for local community and for larger scientific community, nothing is going to save it. If it's only of interest to some small handful of geologists, and we don't communicate the benefit of why that place is called a monument, it's not going to be of any value to anybody, right? So I think that's where the problem is, that we do not communicate why this is of importance. That's the single largest tragedy.
Yeah, this is Manoj Mishra. Pranay, brilliant. Yes. How do you explain this Bhim Kund? Are you aware of Bhim Kund?
Please tell me the location.
This is the tip of Sagar, northern tip of Sagar. There is this Sadar Chhatarpur Road. There is this place called as Bhim Kund, where the story is that it was Bhim which actually hit the earth and then the water came out. It's a fascinating place, but it is such a difficult to understand what is happening there. You go down and then you find this kund, this water, which is absolutely transparent water. And this is also on the YouTube, and there is a lot of, I think, National Geographic or those teams have gone there and tried to understand what it is.
I don't know what it is.
The other thing is, there is one man, Paul Salopak, who is walking, who is retracing the ex-migration of man from Africa, Paul, and he is now in India. Are you in touch with him?
No, I'm not in touch with him, but I know people who are in touch with him, yes. He's doing a fascinating blog on his travel from, I've been following it from Arabia. He's doing some fascinating videos and pictures, amazing stuff. Yeah. Okay. In Bangalore?
No, Aarti following out of Rajasthan.
Out of Rajasthan.
Well, thank you Pranay Lalji for such a enlightening presentation. I just want to bring to your notice, we were working in Chanderi, and there was a farmer who was digging a well, and in that well he found a huge mammoth-like tusk. So there were two things which came out of them. One of them was a fossil, which then I talked to Mr. Badam, who may not be the right person, but he thought it was a jaw of a hippopotamus. So that we managed to kind of retrieve from the farmer, and the other was a fossil of a mammoth. Now I don't know whether there were mammoths in India or what happened. So it's still kept somewhere in Chanderi. We managed to give it to the ASI, but what is the ASI doing about it? I have no idea.
So yeah, I mean, ASI has a lot of people in all their honesty and earnestness gave a lot of material to ASI, and now ASI is not freeing it. Especially in Indore division, there's a huge collection of about 120 eggs. Coming to mammoths, no, we did not have mammoths, but there's a fascinating story that I should have told you, but had I been talking about mammals in this region, there was an elephant that lived called Paleoxodon, which was so big, it was possibly the largest mammal to have walked on Earth. So there's this dispute happening between two creatures, a rhinoceros, a hornless rhinoceros that lived between Russia, Baluchistan and Narmada called Indricotherium. It's a fascinating creature. I have an image in my book. And recently they've discovered skulls and vertebrae of Paleoxodon which are so large that it's now challenging in Indracotherium to be the largest mammal to have walked on Earth. So that's a discovery, and it's happened, actually the discoveries happened both in Chanderi and in Hoshangabad. So, there's so much happening in this locality, just this belt. From Hoshangabad to here, you could do a history of man, you could do the history of birth of, you could do a dedicated museum on just the elephants. And believe me, you have about 10 or 12 species of elephants that lived here, which were much, much larger than the contemporary elephant. So, I think there's just such a dearth of us reaching out to our children and to public at large. And there's so much material that is either getting converted into fertilizer or tuna from home. And that's the tragedy.
So this farmer, then he lined the well, and there's a huge possibility that it will still be around.
Absolutely.
So if I do come to know who this farmer was and where the well is,
I'd love to see
I
it.
think I will get in touch.
Thank you so much.
Because I think there's something in that area.
Wonderful. This is the kind of information we want. Thank you.
Pranay has confined his talk to dinosaurs, but really that's only a very tiny, tiny bit of the total story. The whales, the evolution of the whales actually happened in this part of the world. And along the present political border between India and Pakistan, we name one kind of creature that was evolving into a whale, the Indo-Cetus, and they call it the Pachycetus. So, there's a whole lot of stories, and I really, for those of you who have not read Pranay's book, it is a feast. It's nothing less than a feast. So please do read it, and I hope that is just the beginning of your interest in something that is being hugely neglected in this country. And I hope you all enjoy it very much. Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching the session from BLF 2019. Kindly subscribe to our channel for more such videos.